evening, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much to everyone for being here tonight. We are just so thrilled after the 2 days that we've been spending together thus far to have this evening to introduce a whole additional component to our conversation and to our relationship and our thinking around this work. My name is Catherine Huffman. I'm the Executive Director of the Square One Project, and it's a privilege to be here tonight to think and talk with some true experts on the role of art in social justice and healing from violence. We're gonna be joined tonight by Karan, Kendrick, Damon Turner, Halim Flowers, and Heidi Nell. I am sorry that I bring great apologies from Desiré Vincent-Levy, who, due to a canceled flight, will not be with us tonight, sadly. But we're going to open up our evening with some poetry from Halim, and then the rest of the panel will come up and join us, and we'll have a chance to hear from them and then to have a conversation together. So welcome and thanks for being here. Halim.
Appreciative to be present, for everyone to be here today. I'm going to be sharing 3 pieces with you all, and this means a lot to me because dealing with the topic of art and social justice, I found my gift of art inside of a cage. You know, being a child sentenced to a life sentence and being in solitary confinement at times, having the ability to communicate with nothing but the ants in the crack of my floor. So this first piece that I wrote is titled When They See Us, because I believe this film told my story about children sentenced to life in prison to die. In particular, the story of Corey Wise being a child inside a prison of predatory adults. I'm not going to write poems about people judging people. I'm going to write poems and speak about people loving people. See, the problem is much bigger than just class and race. It's not a political war, but a spiritual battle between love and hate. If it's going to take a village, then our villages are going to need love. So when they see us, they don't see us as killers and thugs. So when they see us and don't judge. So when they see us with eyes full of love. It's not about conservatives and liberals reaching across the aisle. It's about reaching into our hearts to extend a loving smile. These labels are fables that separate us from our truths. We all need to weed the weeds to see the love in our roots. Love is the revolution, and compassion be our bullets. Trigger be the empathy for forgiveness to pull it. Freedom is our target, and unconditional love be our goal. For civic engagement to start at the seat of our soul. Grace plays the symphony as Just Mercy leads the band. For the Lady of Liberty to love and accept all in this land. This next piece is titled We Were Kids. And I want to dedicate this piece to the academic professor who created this theory that young boys like me in the 90s were fatherless and jobless and that we were super predators. We were just kids, but the village failed to raise us. Instead of pouring love into us, they just threw us into cages. But greatness was always within us, even before the life sentence. We were just under 18, yet everyone forgot we were just human beings. Super predators became our labels. That we were children became a fable. Converted us into juvenile lifers. Look at what just 3 years did to Khalif Browder on Rikers. And we did decades, but still remain whole. With nothing but the power of love igniting our soul. We just wanted society to give us a second chance and open us and embrace us with open arms. Give us another chance to bring love and not harm. From lockdown to Georgetown, we just needed someone to believe that grace also encompasses mercy, and that human redemption is more than just a dream. This next piece is a piece that I wrote during the conference. You saw me on my phone. I was paying attention. The conversations were very inspiring from a creative perspective. So I wanted, being as though that we are gathered tonight in the spirit of just mercy. Brian Stevens, someone who was very, like people asked about me going to meet Kim Kardashian, and Brian Stevenson is my Kim Kardashian, right? Bruce Weston is my Kim Kardashian. Marsha Levick is my Kim Kardashian. Though I love the work that Kim is doing in the criminal justice space. But this piece right here I wrote is titled, Just Mercy. Justice is more than a lady holding scales, blinded from the bias by which institutions fail. To consider that mercy is also an equitable force, beyond offering punishment as our only choice. Victims don't heal by caging kids and steal. For equal justice, 13th Amendment must be repealed. Death penalty simply perpetuates the pains. Justice was never confined to being synonymous with chains. Prison can't stop crimes created by poverty, inherited by people who were once chattel property, with no reparations but mass incarceration, made into human capital for prison privatization. What's law and order when hate creates policy, where corporate finance has a political monopoly? Incarcerated people, not criminals and thugs. Language matters. All humans need love. Retribution can be reimagined for victims to heal. Justice is evidence of redemption made real.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Halim. That is crazy, talented, wow. I'm Heidi Nell. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Good Films Impact. And Good Films Impact uses stories and art to catalyze change. And I have the good fortune of working with a couple of these individuals, and Halim, before the night is over, hopefully with you as well, on a project called Reimagine Justice, which is the public engagement and advocacy campaign tied to the theatrical release of Just Mercy. I am so honored and delighted to be here this evening with Karan, Kendrick, who is a lead actress in the film Just Mercy and blew me away in the film, but blew me away on a different level when I saw her as a powerful woman speaking about what this film means to her. So I'm so grateful to have you with us today. She's also the co-founder of the Kendrick Academy, which we'll hear a little bit more about. Equally honored and excited to be here with Damon Turner, who's the CEO of Trap Heels, who is a cultural architect and doing really also mind-blowing and beautiful work around the release of this film to engage audiences in a really transformative way. And Halim Flowers, wow, thank you for who you are. I don't know if, Catherine, you may have said this earlier, but Halim is also the co-founder of Unchained Media, which we're going to hear a little bit more about this evening. So thanks, everybody, for being with us. I'm going to turn it over to a trailer and sort of ground us in the power of art and how we can use art and film to make change.
Should we move?
Tell me everything that happened. The first time I visited death row, I wasn't expecting to meet somebody the same age as me. From a neighborhood just like ours. Could have been me, Mama.
But what you're doing is gonna make a lot of people upset.
You always taught me to fight for the people who need the help the most. Your life is still meaningful, and I'm gonna do everything possible to keep them from taking it. You don't know what you're into down here in Alabama when you're guilty from the moment you're born.
God,
Mr. McMillan.
we done here.
Mr. McMillan, please.
I was just about to give up when I got a call from a Harvard lawyer looking to start a legal center for inmates on death row. I was in before he even offered me the job.
You the lawyer?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for driving all the way out here. Most lawyers barely make time to call.
I can't believe you talked to all my people and said you're gonna fight for me. I did. It mean a lot.
If you go digging in those wounds, you're gonna be making a lot of people very unhappy.
When people care about a thing that much, they'll do anything to get what they want.
When I first learned about all this, it was like looking at a river full of drowning people and not having any way of helping them.
You ain't quitting, is you? No, sir. Each of us is more than the worst thing that we've ever done. I know what it's like to be in the shadows.
It's my dad. He do nothing wrong.
It's never too late for justice.
You're the only one cared enough to fight for me.
If we can look at ourselves closely, we can change this world for the better. We all need grace. We all need mercy. I got my truth back. You gave that to me. And ain't nobody gonna take that from us.
So, Karan, I want to start with you. You play Minnie Walter McMillian's wife in Just Mercy. What did it mean to you to be a part of this film? What do you want to see happen with this film? Why are you passionate about this film and here in Detroit with us speaking around this film tonight?
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. I was initially drawn to this role. First of all, I'd heard a little bit about Bryan Stevenson. I knew on a very surface level about the work that he was doing. I did not understand until I began to work on the film to what extent he was changing lives and really changing the culture of the justice system in America. But when I got the script and I heard of the project and I read the sides, I saw a woman presented or shared in a way that I had not experienced before. I am a Black woman from the South. I saw on paper for the first time my grandmother, and she was human. She was a woman who was complex. She had ideas. She had hopes. She had to make choices about life and how she was going to proceed in it. And I was like, wow, an opportunity to share this woman. And I felt that because of my upbringing, because of my family, because of my background, I was going to be able to tell her story in a very specific way. I was going to be able to honor her because she wouldn't be, in my best effort, one-dimensional. She wouldn't be presented in a way that we are accustomed to seeing Southern Black women presented. She was going to be whole and honored and loved in a way. And so I really entered thinking, how can I serve her? How can I serve the piece? How can I serve this story through her? So that's what drew me in. And I'm in Detroit because through the process of working on the film, it's become a much bigger conversation. When we wrapped, I took a year off. I haven't worked since I did Just Mercy. There was something that said, be still and prepare. because this was going to be more than just doing a movie. Do you know? So for the past year, I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I was preparing for this. Because we have to begin to have very different conversations about who we are as human beings on this planet together. We have to. And what Brian Stevenson is doing is introducing us to ourselves. He is showing us all of ourselves. The stuff that we celebrate and the stuff that we try to hide and pretend doesn't exist. He's showing all of that to us, and he's saying, now, embrace it, acknowledge it. We all got it. Let's figure it out. Yeah? Let's not condemn each other because of it. Let's see it in ourselves and see it in each other, and then go from there. So I'm probably talking too much. Continue.
No.
Please, keep going.
Go in. Yeah, dive in. We out here.
But that's why I'm here.
Incredible. Wow. So, we're gathered here today to talk about the role of art in social justice, specifically healing from violence. Damon and I met at a time where I was totally overwhelmed, not too long ago, and looking for support around how to take this film and transcend it past the screen alone, but into communities through art. And Damon said to me, white people, well-intentioned white people, have a tendency to want to create experiences that are lived experiences for system-impacted individuals who have been traumatized by the system in the past as a way to get proximate to the issue.
Yep.
And you can imagine I was the well-intentioned white person sitting on the other end of the phone talking to Damon about how we should create these life-size cells. And he was like, no. Tell me about, can you just share with the audience sort of the brilliance that you've shared with me over the past few weeks and what you're building through Trap Heals, and specifically how it's healing and bringing healing to communities?
For sure. Peace, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I love Detroit.
Right?
This is a vibe. Y'all are a whole vibe out here.
Yes.
So, first and foremost, I feel like these stories are often told by people who have never experienced the story. And there's a few things that happen in that space. There's a lot of erasure. There's a lot of invisibility. There are nuances that are missed because you just don't know that a smile in this moment means something different than, you know what I mean? And so, unfortunately, people who are the most impacted are not at the table, right? And so that would have more than likely been the situation with Trap Heals if we weren't given space, resources, and investment to ultimately create the change we wanted to see. That opportunity sort of coming across our desk put us in conversation, and then we were able to see what the national campaign was talking about, and because Trap Heals is a cultural architecture firm that works directly with people who are formerly incarcerated, not only as just a case study, but investing in hiring people to be able to live equitably based on the cultures that we created. One of our biggest things was, how do we create spaces as a company? How do we create spaces that heal the people that we are employing? How do we create spaces that heal the communities that we're investing in, right? And being from the South, even though there's a lot of trees in the South, a lot of folks that I know have never been to a garden space, intentionally gone to a garden. And so our aesthetic is putting Black folks from the hood in context to a garden. And what we realized through this process is that even though that we are very, very well-intentioned as a company, we're still triggering and oftentimes asking folks to dig deep into their traumas to even show up for a space of healing. And so as we were in conversation around some of the ideas that were going to nationally be amplified, I realized in that moment, so it was a shock for me as well, that if what y'all were thinking about doing or other folks are thinking about doing was to put people in approximation with, actual prison spaces and like very, the shock culture imagery, how much more would that traumatize somebody if what we're trying to do is create gardens and flowers and alkaline water and all this other stuff to put people in proximity
and
to that. And what?
Reiki.
And Reiki and acupuncture. That's still triggering people who are most connected to the issues, right? Because at the same time as we're talking about, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this, we're asking them like, hey, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think this will work? Do you think da-da-da? And they're like, damn, Dame, like I have to go back into my trauma to even answer this question. I also don't want to be the token person that's formerly incarcerated to speak for the 2.2 million. And so even though you're trying your best, you're still asking me to go into a very dark and deep place. And so I had to be honest and true to these spaces that you all invited me into, to just hold us all accountable to like really opening the door, putting real resources, not the $5,000 grant, but like millions of dollars behind people like Halim, behind people who are like Richie Reseda, who just came home, who are thinking about ways to change the entire structure to not only dismantle the system, but while the system is in place, how do we pipeline people in real time into positions of success? And so for Trap Hills, that's really what we want to do. For example, there are a lot of artists who are in prison right now. Some of the best musicians, singers, songwriters, performers, etc., who are in prison right now, making music, amazing music, but they're not considered for Grammys. They don't get to sell their albums and put that money on their books. So how do we change the system out here, amplify what they're doing, and pipeline them into the limelight, right? And I think those are the conversations that I'm really interested in having, like ideating with folks like you all in the space, or on how we're using our influence, our power to change the system into a space where we can dream way bigger and know that it's possible. I think that's what this space has offered for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Halim, there's a professor that I work with who has this really beautiful quote, and the quote is, if you've never known pain, you wouldn't know that the world needs changing. And if you've never known hope, you would never know that you're the person to change it. And I was really present to that in your speaking earlier. Can you tell us, like, where does your hope come from?
The beauty about literature and arts for someone who's incarcerated, especially our children who we're giving life sentences in the nation's capital and throughout the country, the only nation that does that, it exposes you. Like when I grew up in D.C., it was Chocolate City. I had no other cultural narratives and experiences outside of the urban, what defined as ghetto, parochial, black experience. So, and then you take a child and you put them in a cell in solitary confinement. What the literature and arts did for me, it afforded me the opportunity to escape. It afforded me an opportunity as an artist to do something as adults that we're in our society taught not to do, is imagine, right? And solitary confinement that's all I had. Like when you just put, I don't know how to explain, when you're put inside of a cage, and you know, I remember the first time I went into solitary confinement, they would give me nothing but a Bible. I couldn't get pictures, newspapers, and magazines. So a lot of my writings I quote from Christian scriptures because that experience was so traumatic, but that's all I had, right? And so for me, how I find hope is through imagination, right? Imagining something different than what I see, but also seeing that I have self-worth and that my imagination has value that can be not only monetized, but can have impact globally, right? So, and now that I'm in society for these last 7 months, what I see is that a lot of our social ills is because we're approaching these issues with so much reasoning and rationality and no spirit, no love, and no imagination. So if you look at it like art and social justice and gun violence, and we were super predators. but they still killing in Baltimore and Chicago. So now we see we wasn't an anomaly. But the people who are getting these $1 million grants at the universities and nonprofit industrial complex, they're continuing to get the funding. But the results, if they were a stock on the stock market, their stock would be down.
Going down, bro.
Right?
Plateau.
They would have been kicked out the Dow Jones.
Ben
So for me, what gives me hope is that I know that literally my imagination is a gift from the Creator.
Absolutely.
That was given to me to not only to save myself, to love myself unapologetically, but to use my talents to get people to love themselves fearlessly, to love those who love them with appreciation, and to eventually to transcend to a space to even love those that hate them.
Absolutely.
That type of radical imagination.
Absolutely. And low-key, welcome home, fam. You said 7 months?
Yeah.
Bro, welcome home, bro.
Yes.
Like,
hell yeah. Excuse me. Right. I don't play with that.
Wow. I want to talk about the role of art, and then I want to come back to that $1 million conversation. Like, get in there. We're going to get all the way in there. There's a lot of talk in this space around advocacy and art and how you use art for change about sort of what is the role of art? Should art be something that inspires and sort of leaves people in the inquiry of something? My work is based on narrative transportation, this theory, a scientific theory that shows when people are caught up in a story well told, they leave their shoes and can experience circumstances that are different than their own and come back with changed perception. So people in that school of thought think you should connect it to a specific action, a call to action. What do you think the role of art is? Should it leave people in the inquiry? Should it create a certain experience? Should it direct people to take an action? How do you think we use it to make change?
All of the above.
Yep.
Sorry.
I don't know, but yeah, what he said. I don't think we have to choose one way. I think that people are different and people receive and give in different ways. So you meet people where they are. I think that with what I've been noticing after screenings of Just Mercy is that in certain spaces, people are like, all right, where can I sign up? I'm about to become a lawyer and go work for Brian and we're gonna change the world, you know? There are people who are like, I have resources, how do I give them to this effort? There are people who are, which was my case after, I shared this at TIFF, I have a cousin who's incarcerated. He went in when I was a kid. His dad and my dad are brothers. He's named after my father. So for 24 years and 8 months, I never went to visit. Now, granted, I was a child when he went in, but I've been an adult in that time, and I didn't go. After we wrapped, I've been twice since we wrapped, and this film changed me. It always felt so overwhelming. There's so much that should be done, and I don't know where to start. But what this film forced me to ask and answer is, what is your something?
Yes.
What can you do where you are right now? What is your something? My something first, because I believe in taking care of home first, is I have to connect with my cousin first. That's family. That's home. And I cannot, in good conscience, come out here and speak to anybody about anything if I cannot stand 10 toes down looking into his eyes. And we start there. So it was not easy. It was not convenient. It was not fiscally sound. I'm a working artist in another state. But I made a choice and followed through with it. And I'm glad I did, because it told me about myself. I had to answer questions about me. And I had to be very honest. And there is a level of engagement that he and I now have that went past, the phone calls that we never cut him off, was never embarrassed, never shunned him ever. But there's something beyond that. And something that you said in your work, you mentioned humanity. We are in a space where we don't acknowledge each other's humanity. We don't see each other as people. And I think that's where it begins. So, to answer your question, begin where you are with what you have and give if it's time, if it's resources, if it's understanding, if it's access, if it's connection to all of those things. But I don't think there's one way to move forward. Because in our humanity, we have different things, you know, and we're in different places.
Thank you. Damon, what about you?
Hell yeah.
How do you approach it?
Like, yes, all yes. Every yes. Like, I feel like it's very simple. Oftentimes I see artists being seen as the people who make the flyer for the thing and not really as a thought leader in the thing. And until we're able to have the dreamers who have committed their lives to imagining the world that we could potentially live, like artists have always been at the forefront of the next iteration of society. So why is it all of a sudden that the artists are now taking the back seat and seen as only the commodified version of the thing? Oh, we want to build a new development, so let's get some artists in here with at low rent, you know what I'm saying, to make this shit cool. And then once it's cool and it's the art district, let's actually raise the rents, bring Starbucks in and move the artists out, right? And it's like, that doesn't really make sense to me. And so I think when it comes to the question, it has to be comprehensive. I don't believe in the one-pronged structure anymore. We've seen over history that it doesn't work. We've seen over history that if you have the one leader, historically a black cis man, you know what I mean, they can take that black leader out and then all of a sudden everything goes back to the way it was, unfortunately. As opposed to having a very comprehensive approach to changing society. And starting, I think, with what every black leader who was assassinated left on was economic empowerment, economic justice, economic sustainability, self-determination. Like having that piece becoming the focal point of what we're talking about, hence why my CFO is here today, having that be a central point in the conversation to ultimately then leverage that for the political piece that is ultimately envisioned by these creators. There's a very strong triangle that we can make here, right? As opposed to let's lean on the political. Let's all get in the street. And I was in the streets. I was a part of creating Black Lives Matter 7 years ago with a team of very strong black women, and thank God for y'all. I really appreciate you all. And I was often thinking about how we're using that opportunity in that moment as a cultural change. Society turned it into a political thing. Patrice, Alicia, and Opal very intentionally knew that they wanted to create spaces for imagination to thrive. But everybody grabbed on hold, like, oh, this is political, let's shut some shit down. Oh, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. I was like, no, it's always been a thing, but the train took off. They had to follow it. And so I think it's really important that artists are centered in the conversation. When I saw the briefing for this event, my first question was like, wait, we're talking about academics, civic engagement folk, policy folk. Is this the only art panel? I'm like, oh no, I'm on the art panel. Oh no. I wanted to kick it with some artists too.
It's on you. It's on you.
We're
going to integrate here. We're going to
integrate. You know, and piece to these spaces, but I think we have to integrate artists a little bit more intentionally in the dialogue.
Cool. Halim, how do you approach your work when you give so much light and love to the world and the spaces you're in? Do you leave it at that and leave people to do what they do with it? Do you hope they do something specific with it? How do you approach it?
Radical love, right? Radical means rooted. The etymology of the word means rooted. So I had a conversation earlier about when I make a statement to people and I be like, I love Donald Trump. And they be like, how you love him? I be like, I don't hate him. I'm not saying that I love his policies or his politics or his tweets, but I was a menace to society. Somebody loved me, right? I sold drugs to my own aunt. I shot people. I stabbed people. I did the worst of things, but I wasn't the worst of people. I was responding to being victimized, being small and not having big brothers, and being, you know, like one of the speakers said, like having an illusion of choices, right? So I just don't have it in me to hate or give up on anyone, right? I believe that anyone can change up until the point that they die. So that's the type of radical love that I lead with. And oftentimes it can be misunderstood, but I don't care no more. That's my secret. Like, I just don't care. If I'm going to err, I don't mind erring on the side of love.
Yes.
That's real. And I think I'm sorry, can we just like talk?
Because I'm not passive.
Right.
You know, nobody can be like, well, you being passive. Like, my whole history negates that.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm choosing to love because I'm a coward. Right.
Come on in.
It's
here,
not passive.
Halim.
You know, loving is not passive. It's very intentional, and it's revolutionary.
Yes.
Cancel culture was the worst thing that ever happened, I think. To your point, it's so easy to be like, Halim just said Donald Trump, man, you canceled, bro. Like, go back to jail. Like, it's so wild to see what people are doing when it comes to a different thought process, right? And it's easier to dismiss you than it is to engage with you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think if we're able to create a space where we have more radical dialogue, and let me just ask you, like, okay, you love Donald Trump. What does that actually mean to you? And once you break it down in that context, you're right, bro. I don't want to go out tweeting about loving Donald Trump because the world ain't ready for that. But like, you know, how are we normalizing and popularizing discourse again when we all have been ultimately subjugated to 140 characters? Like, and ultimately creating the culture now amongst us that is influencing the next generation. You know, I have a 14-year-old daughter who is sneaking to get on Snapchat. Oh, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. But one of my biggest commitments to her, overtly and covertly, is I'm going to do something now that's going to inject what I'm doing into what your ecosystem looks like, right? Whether it's getting on TV that you watch, whether it's making songs with the artists that you love, whether it's writing the books, whether it's doing some cool fashion shit. I don't know. Hanging out with you, you know what I mean? She sees you on the screen, it's like, oh, damn, Dad, you cool, you know? And doing more things like that so that we can begin introducing more nuanced conversations, man. Like, I promise you, I have a podcast called Damon and Damon, a podcast, and one of our first episodes was literally talking about cancel culture. That was when the R. Kelly documentary came out. And everybody was like, man, R. Kelly, this, and we were like, yeah, R. Kelly he don't need to be hanging around because he's problematic, dangerous. Right. And what happens to folks who are ultimately problematic? My boy Damon Davis was like, that's not Damon Davis. My boy Damon Davis was like, I'm problematic because I come from a community and a system and a people that have problems. So if I don't have the right language right now that understands all the LGBTQIA, that doesn't understand transness and da-da-da-da, and I might slip up, why am I ultimately inherently canceled? Like, you don't have space to love me, to say, hey, bro, we don't say inmate anymore, we say incarcerated folk. Right. You know what I'm saying? And so I think people are so galvanized to be on one that it's like, bro, chill, man. Like, we about to chill, we're gonna be okay. And creating that new normal is really important.
I want to go back to the TV thing. Yes, all of that. TV. Inserting your way into culture, making what we show on screen different, making sure that the stories we tell are led by the people whose stories they are. Karan, what are you seeing in the industry that's like positive and leading to that positive change? What are you doing to change the other stuff? How do we make sure that it's not a bunch of people who look like me that are telling stories about people who don't look like me? And how does everybody work together to get there?
We had an inclusion writer on this project. And so I walked onto set and I was everywhere. Everywhere I looked, there were black women. I was like, hey, sis. So there's immediately a level of comfort and ease. I can let my shoulders down. I can breathe deep. Because I am not going to be first misunderstood. And if there is a misunderstanding, there's somebody be like, oh, no, this is what it is, right? So there's a level of grace that happens when you are in the room. There's a level of validation when you see yourself, versus when I worked on other projects that were $1 projects, and I saw like one black person. It was a guy. I remember this so clearly. And when we saw each other, we were like, like, we're Facebook friends to this day. And there was nothing bad that happened in the project, but you don't see yourself, you start disappearing a little bit. So the inclusion writer was huge. And it wasn't just black women. there were people of color, of all different kinds of colors and experiences. And we were all able to kind of, like, it evened it out. Everybody was a minority, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, there was enough of everybody there for us all then to have to engage. It wasn't business as usual, so that wakes you up in a way. I think what is imperative now in the industry is that we begin to have the support, have the capital to tell our own stories, not just to be in front of the camera, but to write the stories, to be behind the camera. In my time off, because I was like, really, God? I'm not gonna work, huh? No jobs.
A whole year. Okay.
A whole year, right? And so, but one thing that came out of it was I wrote. I wrote like 3 different pieces. And I was like, okay, what I've learned in this process is that I'm going to tell you a story about a Black woman like nobody else can tell you. Exactly. Because there are parts of me that other people can't see or won't see or don't understand when they see it. So if I pull the curtain back about myself, you are now going to experience me in a way that you couldn't have before. And it goes back to, oh, so you're human. Oh, so you're a woman. So you're complex. You have ideas like I have ideas. There's a scene that I hope will make it into like the director's cut. That didn't make it into the film, and it was not in the script. But I said, Minnie's awful strong with what she's experienced in life. And I wrote this email to Destin. And now I don't know these people from Adam's House Cat, okay? So
The director.
The director, yes, and co-writer. And I'm like, this is a pretty bold move, kid. Think about this before you just go sending emails to people. And I was like, sleep on it. And if you think about it in the morning. And when I woke up, it was like the first thing on my mind. And so I sent him an email, and I was like, Minnie's very, very strong, and we owe her more than that. Because she's standing up, and she's standing in the gap for her husband, and she's supporting her children, and she's the woman, who tells the rest of the community it's okay for us to love him and support him. Also, she's broken. Also, the weight of the world is kind of on her shoulders. And I said, we need one moment, just one moment, where Minnie breaks, where she lets go. And she doesn't have to stay there. She can pick herself up or be picked up and then move on. But we just need a moment to show people that she's not a strong Black woman. She's a human being.
That's right.
And he did it. He emailed me back. He said, you're right. And he did it. And we recorded it. We didn't know what it was going to be. We talked about it. And I'm in the truck with him as we're talking. I'm like, this is really happening.
Emails work.
Right. Good thing I said something. This is dope. And so we recorded this scene. Like I said, I hope you will get to see it in some way at some point.
My gosh.
But I am in the kitchen, and I think I'm making tea or something. And I just let go. It's just me and like the moonlight. And I just let go. And off camera, my daughter calls my name. And I come back, I pull it together, and I go and tend to her. But there's just a moment, because people need to know. And so that was something as a Black woman that I needed to share. And I think that now, what if we had a whole story?
Talk that talk.
Where you get to see a Black woman, where you get to see her dealing with life and how she deals with it. And that she's not always strong, but she's always human. What happens then? And so then art begins to influence how we deal with each other.
And how we heal.
How we heal. And guess what? Black women then can see themselves. And that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole combo.
You guys, awkward response to that. We're losing Halim to an airplane.
Yes.
Thank you, Karan, so much for your vulnerability and your strength. And Halim, thank you so much for your vulnerability.
I told Jeremy that I was going to read this poem before I leave.
Oh my gosh, please.
Yes.
Read it. This one that I wrote, Square One. I named it after the the event just came to my mind while everybody was talking, sharing these great ideas. Circles can't fit nicely into a square. Cages, our children were never meant to be there. Violence is a deficit of love condition. Restorative justice encompasses contrition. Individuals cause less harm than institutions. Over-policing and mass incarceration are not effective solutions. Justice is something that we must reimagine as a scale to balance equity and compassion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to make you proud and go back to the $1 million question on your way out. How do you parlay what you're talking about with the inclusion writer and that giving way to an experience on set and giving you sort of like the confidence and the courage to be able to make what feel like bold requests, right? How do you parlay that into the academic and the philanthropic space for broader art? Thoughts?
I think that in the academic space, I had the privilege of going to Spelman College. So I was surrounded by Black women thinkers, and it wasn't an anomaly. You know, I hear, oh, you speak so well. I love the way you convey these ideas. I'm like, baby, there's an army where I came from. This is what we all do. We all speak well. We all understand how to communicate. We're studied, and we're human, and we walk in bare feet and high heels. This is what we do. But there's an entire world of us, community of us, right? And so, but I think in terms of before I went to Spelman, and I was in a majority space where I didn't feel like I had a voice or that my voice was ridiculed or misunderstood. And so in academic spaces, making room for those voices to be able to come forward and listen to them and honor them and believe them. And if you're not sure about it, ask questions, engage with them. You know, voices that are not your own, because there is not one simple truth that we have to all abide by. We all have different perspectives. I think in the philanthropic space, write a check.
Don't nobody want to,
you know,
can't get no thumb claps, okay.
You know, take the time, because it's easy. That's easy. Like, I started a school when I graduated from college, because I was like, everything that I just learned, I want to share with everybody who doesn't have access to what I just learned. And so, right, and I was crazy. I was like, what? And sometimes I'm like, what was I thinking? But I went home and I like got together people who were always like, oh, we support you. I was like, bet, I got this building I want to buy. Because I needed to teach the children, right? And they were like, okay. So they pulled and got the building. Then we renovated it. And then we started teaching classes. And like, you know, Shanae has been with me for so many years. She has taught, she has orchestrated events, you know, it was like all hands on deck. Yes. But in a certain space, it was not sustainable. And so I had to rethink my programming. I had to rethink, okay, how do I approach this? I think that you give what you have access to. I have access to ideas and people and knowledge and protocol. You're right? What I don't have access to is how to always pay for all of that. Or even, if you're not writing a check, teach me how.
That part.
Keep your check. Give me the information so that I understand. Well, you can give me the check.
Give me the
too.
check, yeah.
Right.
Both and, yeah.
But teach me how that triangle that you were talking about, teach me how that works. And then I can pair what I have with your knowledge and your understanding. And then it can be sustainable. Now we're changing like generations of people and thought, and we're building foundations so that the person who comes behind me is starting here.
Absolutely.
And then it just continues to go up from there. Absolutely. So those are my thoughts on it.
I appreciate that. if I could just veggie back off of that,
Please.
I think also
Veggie back.
And I don't do the pork. Can't do the pork. Facts. That's true. I love the idea of making space for folks now. I'm also very interested in what does it mean for folks in academia who are theorizing literally all day to put something into practice on campus, to make a hybrid model that brings certain folks from certain schools and departments together to create another space where, you know, somebody who might not have the credentials to be in a MFA or an MBA right now, but they have great ideas. They have been incubated in a particular way in the community. That's what we're here to do, and get them ready with certification that can put them in this space where they're working with technologists, they're working with writers, they're working with researchers, they're working with cultural, artists, et cetera, and then they're shaping something, right? As opposed to being siloed, as we often do on campuses, away from everybody. All the business majors are all over here talking about all the money, hanging out, going to Starbucks, chilling, going to the country club, hanging out. All the artists are over here, you know what I'm saying, chilling on the grass with their socks off, you know what I'm saying, chilling.
Yeah.
But who's on campus saying, like, no, y'all need to come together and see what we can create and make that the cool thing, make that something that's accredited, you know what I mean? And then find the folks, the alumni, to invest in these spaces. I know USC has a really interesting space that Dr. Desiré and Jimmy Iovine are investing in. I'm not sure how that's going, but that's the first that I've seen of it. And I'm not, I don't know, but that's the first I've seen of bringing different disciplines together to see what happens. And even if it's just for networking purposes, it's better to show folks how to think about other parts of society and not be so singular in their thought process. Yeah, I'm excited about those kind of approaches. And ultimately, like, tapping in with folks who are doing like the grassroots stuff on the ground, working with them more in tandem so that we can create this pipeline. We all know about the prison industrial complex and the school to prison pipelines. And I'm really big on pipelining folks into things. So how do we work on the ground, get folks ready? We have a direct connection to you and the funder right here. We're saying, great, this is a cohort. We're about to move them and accelerate them now in this space and see what they can do.
Yeah.
New models.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions?
Thank y'all for letting us just talk.
Yes. Thank you.
Anyone? Anyone?
Bueller?
Yes.
Peace. Hands. Me? Damon.
Damon.
Yes, ma'am.
Damon, you said that the last thing that you said when you asked how can we get academics to really focus on bringing all of these things together.
Yes, but I think Brother Rob wants to turn the mic on. Shout out to Brother Rob, who our tech person, holding it down.
Yay, Rob.
Yeah, gotta show love to the invisible folks.
So I love what you said, your last part, as far as academics. I'm academics.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't look like it. I'm right here at Wayne State University, and one of the main things that I get all the time from students that look like me, that don't believe I'm an academic, because they don't see me. They don't see me. And when they do see me, I tell them who I am and what I do. They tell me all the time, we didn't think that we had any black professors on campus. So, and we are here and we do exist. And when we do get together, it's about 200 of us. Okay, and that's academic staff, administrators, that's pretty much everybody. So one thing that you did say, which I tried to do, but my issue is that if it doesn't fit within the whole grand scheme of things that's going to generate some dollars, ain't nobody going to do it, or help me do it, or help me pull this money together to do it. I go outside to ask for help just to run my summer program on campus to bring these young people on campus, to give them that experience to talk about these same things that you are saying, but it's hard to find resources, and it's hard to find that support because we sit in a beautiful part of the city where, because I'm an academic, I still have to pay for food and catering and dorm rooms, and we don't get it for free.
Sure.
At all.
Yeah.
So those resources are hard to come by. So I know how to fundraise. I know how to ask for money. I'm not shy at doing it at all. But it's almost to the point where I'm begging, and that's where I have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have to beg.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where I have to beg, or my program is not going to run, and I'm going to disappoint these young people.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you can tell me and others that are doing this work, outside of the whole grant thing,
Sure.
the old nonprofit
Sure.
grant thing, because we have the power, we have the resources, we have the money right here in our own backyard.
Yeah.
But I got to compete with another department. I got to
Sure.
compete with another college. I got to
Yeah.
compete with, the
the
prioritization
things. Yeah.
that we talk about these things. I'm way down here.
Did you say your name was Miss Barbara? No.
My name is, you can call me Miss Barbara.
Miss
yes.
Barbara?
Barbara Jones.
Miss Barbara Jones. I appreciate you asking that type of question because I loathe panels, just to be honest. I like the idea of like anti-panel panels where we actually talk for like 5 minutes and then talk about actual solutions for issues. I would love to talk to you outside of this space,
Okay.
what I will offer the room is, so as a cultural architect that's from the South, trap music, trap culture was created in the South, and it's been commodified. Billions of dollars are generated from this culture.
I know what that means.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I look
I'm just
old.
speaking for folks who may not. Who like trap? You trapped in what? I think what I'm interested in doing is using that which is already popularized to leverage visibility, to leverage access to capital, et cetera, to then the spook that sat by the door, if anybody's read the book, seen the movie, to then like subversively figure out a way to change and modify the system. And so if you're working with young people, who already have what is hip, what is tight, what is poppin', figure out a way that we can create social entrepreneurship opportunities to fund itself, right? And I'm not trying to hyper simplify it, but that is one way of not only creating an ecosystem for folks, but creating another pipeline of skills, right? Here's how you start a business. Here's what you can da-da-da-da-da, right? And let that ultimately, because I feel what anybody will invest in is something that's already working.
Yep.
That's what I'm realizing. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen, is that you want to give me more money because I already have money, right? So finding ways to start even in a micro way, document the hell out of it, and then just keep replicating that model. But I would love to talk to you more specifically what you're doing at Wayne State. For sure. Sure. Yeah, I want to be in Detroit, so I want to embed in the culture here, so for sure. We'll figure it out.
Thank you,
Ms. Barbara Jones.
Thank you, Ms. Barbara. Thank you, Damon. One more. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So Damon and Karan, thank you so much. My name is Juan.
Peace,
and
Juan.
I had the privilege, really, to be in a conference in California where the trailer for Just Mercy was played, and Brian Stevenson was on the stage along with Jamie Foxx and Michael B. Jordan, and the director, Dustin...
Daniel Cretton.
Right, Cretton. So from both of y'all's perspective, especially now that we're talking about an incredible force called Brian Stevenson. So I'm a lawyer myself. I've been doing public interest civil rights law since the 1980s, since I came out of school. So I understand, fully understand, his legacy.
Sure.
So I guess I want to ask both of y'all, from that perspective, what can you share with us about working on a film project that talks about his legacy?
Thank you, Juan. So part of telling the story is, Brian Stevenson and EJI started this work 30 years ago. And they show up every day to do the work. We came to amplify the story so that people could begin to see it and engage in a different way.
Yep.
I've learned a lot by reading the book over and over just to kind of soak it in, by working on the script, by shooting it, but by sitting with him and hearing him talk about the work that he's doing. Brian Stevenson, I am not fully convinced is human.
That's the one person who ain't human.
No, really.
He's tapped in.
He is graced to do this work. When we were filming, I was like, ooh, I'll get a chance to finally meet him. Actually, I didn't, because he was working on cases. I had this idea that, Hollywood is telling this story in a very special way, and he's going to be on set, and I'll be able to, meet him. And no. I think he traveled in for something to do what he needed to do there. And then he was back arguing before courts of the land to change policy. He is so committed to the work that he is doing. And something else that struck me is I went to a dinner celebrating 30 years of EJI. The Equal Justice Initiative is his organization, EJI.org. And he brought his staff on stage, 150 people. And interacting with them, like at TIFF, and interacting with them after the gala, there is a lightness in spirit that they all carry, and that Brian carries. And you read the book and you understand the work that he's doing, that he has been doing for decades. And in my mind, there is a certain gravity, a certain weight that he should just carry, because it's so much. And especially his staff. People who have to really facilitate in the he's there too, but who have to really facilitate this work. And I asked him, I was like, everybody is so happy. Everybody, and not just happy, but there's a lightness of spirit. How? He said, kindness is still important. How you treat people is still important. So it's not for him just about the end product.
Exactly.
It's about the process, which goes back to humanity. Seeing people as people. Seeing people who and where they are, beginning there, and working together to affect change. So that's what I learned from him and from people working with him. And I will say this, from lights, set, sound, makeup, producers, on set, it was unspoken, but there was just a heightened level of responsibility, I think, that we all carried with this. This was not to be trifled with. This was to be honored. And so everybody, we never talked about it, but everybody on set, it was like we were carrying precious cargo.
Yes.
We didn't want to mess this up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The intangible. When I hear legacy, I'm often thinking like, what kind of property can I leave my kids? Or what kind of inheritance can I leave my kids? But what you just said really enlightened me on just the intangible forms of legacy. Like taking something like kindness, taking something like process, and adopting that in every moment of my life, so that the next person that I come in contact with feels that. And when they say, damn, why you feel kindness, bro, Brian Stevenson. At this, you know what I mean? Like legacy is also this intangible spiritual feeling and connection to humanity again. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's important.
Our evening together is coming to a close. Brian Stevenson often says the other side of poverty is not wealth, it is justice. And we in this room have heard that a million times, and I think believe that at our core. For me, art is hope. And I think the other side of challenge is hope. And certainly each of us are in the trenches doing the work, fighting for something that's bigger than any one of us and all of us together. And so I invite everybody this evening to leave and ask yourself this evening and into the weekend, where do you find your hope? Where does that come from for you? Thank you so much, Catherine Huffman and the Square One Project. and the Arnold Foundation and the Joyce Foundation.
And piece of this beautiful space. This is what?
The beautiful Wright Museum, yes.
Wright Museum?
I'm going to turn it over to you, but thank you so much, Karan and Damon, for being in Detroit with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
And I have nothing to add to that except thanks again to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Halim, who is hopefully at the airport by now. And thank you to all of you all for being here with us tonight. It's just been a gift, and I'll speak for myself, but it's certainly what I needed. So thank you for that. We'll look forward to seeing many of you back at Wayne State tomorrow morning. And thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you.